right. Thank you all. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 18th, 2020 work session of the Falls Church City Council. We are delighted you all are here with us this evening. Our meeting is tonight, Tuesday, because obviously the President's Day holiday yesterday. Our first item of business on the agenda is preserving mature trees during residential redevelopment in Falls Church, and that is the Urban Forestry Commission. So you guys come on down. We'd love to hear from all of you. Come on down, sit at the table with us.
I thought she was. Well, she had an addition to what was already in the packet.
No, just they would set up. I was
Well,
so how do we project what's on his laptop?
so it would be. I'll tell you what. Maybe what we could do is have. You want to have one item go in front of you, and we can get ourselves organized.
Yeah.
I'll
Might bring you up for
all right. All right, well, I'll tell you, if Kate doesn't show up, we can go ahead and get started. Do we send her a text?
So, Mayor Charter, what I was just discussing with Mr. Szymanski is to have the treasurer go first,
Okay.
and we'll have the report on senior tax relief from the treasurer, and we'll get ourselves organized for urban forestry because they have a PowerPoint they'd like to put up, and I don't have it on my computer.
All right. Well, we will do that then. Let's go ahead and switch our agenda. If you guys don't, you can hang out at the table if you want, wherever you want to do. It's fine by us. All right. Mr. Costa's absent, so thank you for filling in. We appreciate that. Story of my life. That's right. So we're going to talk about tax relief, senior disability tax relief, and get a report on what the what transpired of this past year since we approved this. I guess maybe it was last summer, wasn't it? So, all right, what's the story? All right, well, let's open it up to questions. Do we have some questions? All right, well, thank you so much. No, wait, Letty?
Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, I agree with you. Overall, it seems like the program did what we wanted. We're helping more people, and other people are helping. I think we're helping them with greater amounts, especially in the deferral, which I think is where we were uncertain. So that's good news. Do we have data on what the average amount that we've either relieved or deferred is pre and post program changes? Because I saw you guys had a bunch of other good data in there, but I was curious whether you have the amount in 2019 per person on average versus 2020. And then overall, I think one of the things we were basing an assumption of the program expansion was that helping more people stay in Falls Church wouldn't have higher taxes. Looks like we have under 60 people participating in the program, so probably a small enough number. It'd be great for us to start tracking how long they stay so that we actually get some data. I know we looked at data elsewhere to kind of support that hypothesis, but it'd be great for us to track these 56 people ourselves and say, like, how long do you stay in the city now that you've entered this expanded program? Do we actually see that it's helping them stay in the city longer? So we get kind of their subjective feedback, but it'd be great for us to actually track. They entered the program in 2020, they moved out in 2026. be able to show the data before and after the changes. Because I think, assuming this goes well for another couple of years, I'd like to continue making benchmark the program with other jurisdictions too. This is just getting more expensive. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lick. Now,
Remind me again the mechanics. If you were eligible for deferral but then move into relief, what happens to the deferred taxes at that point? Stay in deferred. So once somebody moves into the full relief category, it's the taxes and relief from that point on, but everything that was deferred beforehand stays in that money. Okay, great. This is great. I think this is good news, and the fact that we were only over budget because of the deferral and that would be recouped is positive. Thanks.
other questions, Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Treasurer. Either anecdotally or actually, did you guys have any impression of the administrative workload change, if any, significant, noticeable, not noticeable? Good. Checklist. We like checklists. That's good. Just for those of us whose brains are not large, can you remind us the cycle that people are on now to apply and be included or not, and informed and so forth? So what's the annual routine? Okay, so April 15th, date, which is easy to get in people's minds probably, would then be the date around which the communications would be issued by the city to let folks know if they did not participate. Finally, were there any folks who came close but didn't quite make it the last time that we might expect to come through this go round?
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Thank you for this. When people once apply to this program, it's a 3-year term, right, before they have to reapply? So do they have to apply again in April or not? Yes. Ah. Okay. Got it. Okay. Oh, okay. So there's a partial application. Yeah. And then as we were working through this, as part of the working group, you provided these great spreadsheets that just described where everyone is. Are you still keeping those spreadsheets? So you have those, which we're not going to share publicly because it's got people's private information on it, but really keeping track of who's in and who might be in. Okay. And then when do people find, do they get their tax bill or their tax assessment? Do they get a letter about this? Okay. And then, but at some point when I get, I think it's a tax bill, there's a note in there that says, if you may have trouble paying this, contact the treasurer's office. Does that go out with the bill or with the assessment? Do you know? On the bill? Okay. So that's another way of letting people know that that exists. Yeah. So you're pretty confident that those who qualify know about it and are taking advantage of it. There are vast pools of people that would qualify if they knew it was available. Okay. Right. Right. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for this successful program, administering it. And one more question, Mr. Snyder.
I had one of the vets on Memorial Day ask me about programs for veterans. Are we doing enough? So my question is, to you, is the program sufficiently open so vets qualify? One, two, I guess it's been the last tell me your city manager and what's the other programs that might be okay. That answers the question. I don't know if there's other ways to get the word out, but what this one that brought that there may be an absence of information, so just take it. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's
Just quick, it might be good to do something on Memorial Day and Veterans Day at events. Have some material out.
All right. Thank you very much, Nikki. We appreciate it, and keep us posted on the program. But it sounds like it's off to a good start. So thank you so much. All right. Now I think we're ready, Mr. Szymanski and Company. You guys ready to come on down? Friends in Urban Forestry.
you, members of council, for inviting us to come back. We are following up to the work session, your work session in November. We studied ways to preserve mature trees in residential neighborhoods, and we're going to run you through a little bit of the data that we talked about last fall, just to bring everybody up to speed on it. And then we'll talk about possible strategies that we consider before we start. Kate's going to run you through the data.
So to start with, Falls Church has 46% canopy cover, which exceeds most jurisdictions in Virginia. Most of the city's canopy cover is on residential land. So most of the city's land is residential. So this is probably our primary source of canopy cover is residential, and that's why it's so important. Developers are currently required to preserve trees and or plant them to meet 20% canopy requirements within 10 years. Keep in mind that 10 years is not the end point. Trees will grow for 40, 50, 100 years. So 10 years is just an arbitrary point because we needed something to shoot for that was a measurable length of time. If we had a 40-year horizon, it'd be really hard to measure if we're meeting it. So the 10-year horizon is really just a point along a long continuum. Merely planting more trees will not change the public's perception of great loss. When you have a neighborhood full of big trees and they get cut down and replaced with little ones, there's a perception of loss because you have lost something. The challenges in saving mature trees come primarily from the size of the house footprints. So when people tear down a house and rebuild, they build a house almost always bigger than the one that was torn down, and that takes up more space, and that space may have had trees in it. Data summary number 2, who's got the reading? So about 1% of the city's single family zoned area is redeveloped each year. So if this boom continues for a full 10 years, that's 10% of the city's single family zoned area. Residential redevelopment. So in finding all this data for the council for the last meeting, we discovered that on average, 19% of most development lots is left undisturbed. And then after redevelopment, the preserved canopy cover is an average of 11% of each lot. So not all of that 19% that's undisturbed has healthy canopy cover on it. So we do require them. Our code requires people to leave land undisturbed if they don't need to disturb it. So it's not always protecting trees. Sometimes it's just protecting grass. But in any case, they only are allowed to disturb what they need. And on average, 5.3 mature trees are lost per lot and 3.1 mature trees are saved. That is the mean of kind of a large swing, but that is the average number.
So many pages. So here are the range of things that we considered with that regulation in terms of requirements, possible incentives, and the idea of variances themselves. Thought about incentives to maintain the trees on part of the project. Looked at regulations, existing people, and then we thought in terms of public education. So here's what we settled on in terms of things for you to consider. The world is not that develop flexible setbacks or other creative zoning options where the moving of a new house's footprint could allow us to preserve it from other trees. Providing incentives to developers for preserving more trees. The idea of working with stormwater engineers to allow trees to be credited as part of the stormwater best management practices. The engineers would ensure that any best management practices are consistent. Then we thought the idea of state legislation to add mature tree preservation to allow for stormwater use was something to consider.
Along those lines, just so you know, there are groups working with Chesapeake Bay Regulation, Citizens for a Healthy Bay, and others that are looking at how mature trees can fit into stormwater BMPs. So if Falls Church were to try to influence legislation in Richmond, we would not be alone. There are other groups doing the same.
So another track, just so you know, we'll listen to some of the questions that you all have. Remember, possible strategies for general folks using Cog's cookbook to develop cover goals by landmarks. Or plant more trees, run away on private property, which requires invest in additional incentives for trees with particular benefits. So that's really the bulk of our formal presentation. I want to do questions.
I imagine we do. Is there anything before we go to questions? Anything else you want to talk about in general, just of interest to us and the city council? All right, you hold that thought. Why don't we go to questions? But if there's things you want to talk about that are not necessarily related to exactly what we're talking about right this minute, bring them up tonight. Tonight's a good time for that.
I do, same.
Yeah. All right, why don't we go to questions then for folks around the table on the city council side? Anyone have any questions? Vice Mayor Connolly?
So the COG cookbook that you're talking about, does that exist or it's being built?
It does not exist yet. There is a draft. We have a meeting on the 20-something to go over that draft, so I believe it'll be done by March was the goal.
Are we involved in the making of it? Is that
I am involved in
you're
the making
involved-
of
okay.
it. So I'm in a subcommittee that's under Mr. Z's committee. So we do have representation in that.
Okay. So one of the ideas is this creative zoning and flexible setbacks. Has anyone done that elsewhere, or is that a new thing?
That I don't know. I also don't know what's allowed within code. So I have had preliminary discussions with John Boyle and with Paul Stoddard and with Jim Snyder, and I think they all are on board with whatever's allowable within code. I think they would be happy to sit down with us and discuss it and find new ways to do it. But beyond just suggesting that that's a great idea, no, there have not been any detailed.
Ms. Hardy, then Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Thank you. So I think in general, all these strategies are worth more consideration. My question's similar to Mary Beth, so in that I'd like them kind of all listed and then figure out what we have power currently to do and what requires more legislation or code expansion or some sort of ordinance change. So I think that'll help us prioritize it. Because I think any one of these could be pretty powerful. In general, I like a combination of stick and carrot. So I think the incentive part makes sense, especially, I know there was state legislation that we are tracking to allow trees to be counted towards the stormwater. I think Arlington's interested in that as well, so I'm kind of curious, Cindy's not here currently, where the status of that one is. Because if we get power granted this session, then that's a big knock on quickly. On the stick side, currently, do we have the power to actually require that if trees are taken down over a certain size, that they have to get a permit or pay a fee?
No.
So we don't have that power, nor do we do it.
On private property at this time, I'm not sure what we could do from the state. but the power that I know of that we use on private residential property, we enforce tree conditions only during development. So if a property is not undergoing redevelopment, you can cut down every tree on your property. You can cut down, unless it's a specimen tree. But if you don't have a specimen tree, you could have a really big, beautiful tree that everyone in your neighborhood loves, but you hate, and you can cut it down. So we do not regulate trees on private properties at this point.
Is it because we just don't do it, or is it because we don't have the power to?
A little of both. We did it in the past, and I'm not sure whether it was the way we did it or the fact that we did it was really not pretty much lost in court, denying people permits to remove trees. So our code, the city code at this point, says that residential land is exempt from such permits. Whether we can change city code, I haven't investigated state code, whether we could change city code for that. It does open up a can of worms. I hesitate to regulate on private property because when the city arborist goes to someone and says, you can't remove that tree in your yard, I think it's perfectly sound. What if I'm wrong? Falls, then smashes your house and hurts somebody. Then the city becomes liable. So I really hesitate to go there, partly for staffing reasons. We don't have time to be everyone's personal arborist, and partly it just opens up a liability can of worms that I'd rather not. A personal reason I don't like it is that when you mentioned the carrot and the stick, I think that it's really important that people in general comply with the law because they want to. And if they see trees as the enemy, as a weapon that's used against homeowners, I think they'll be less likely to want to comply. I think most people want to comply, and my biggest concern is making sure that culture of maintaining trees on our property continues. I think that probably works better than most sticks.
So going back to the carrot, one other one I think you had referenced was actually using mature trees to count towards your stormwater taxes or fees. How much do we give any for mature trees right now?
No, we don't.
Is that something that we could quantify? Because clearly they suck up a lot more water than a young tree, right?
There would have to be a system. The stormwater engineers are leery of that because virtually everyone has trees, and so if everyone gets a discount, then everyone's rate's going to have to go up. Essentially, you'll have to pay the same amount because we need the same amount. So that is a possibility, though. So if the rate were more differential, if you do more good things, your rate is lower than someone who does fewer good things, then I think that's definitely something we can talk about. But in order, we can't really put a value on a particular tree. It would have to be a system that says every tree that's over X size. Something simple like that. But again, the problem becomes, how do we know that tree is still there? Are we going to have regular annual inspections of people's backyards to make sure they have their trees? So the details can get special.
For that one in particular, it might make sense to discuss with the Stormwater Task Force as we revamp actually what that looks like.
True.
Factors into that.
Right. This is a good time to bring it up.
Yep. And then the last thing was actually something in your response to us, which thank you, I appreciate the point-by-point responses. I think one of your analysis showed that there's actually no correlation between the number of trees cut down versus house size. Remember reading that?
Yeah, that was strange.
Yes, because that's counter than what you think the common concern you always hear is, oh my God, we're building these giant houses, we have to cut down so many trees.
But here's the difficulty. Within Falls Church, in my memory, there's one house that was built less than the maximum size, pretty much. So there isn't a big. The house is pretty much always 25% of the lot. So the house size didn't make as much difference as we thought because all of them take up 25% of the lot. So a smaller house is on a smaller lot. A bigger house is on a bigger lot. So the number of trees did not directly correlate with the size of the house. Within Falls Church, the number of trees that get lost for residential development is there's a range that applies to absolutely every property because they're actually very much alike. Each property is very much alike. I think is what I
I think Ross is up, and then you can.
Thanks. So, I don't know residential real estate as well as I know commercial real estate, but one of the things that I do know, especially given the challenge that we have at the state level, is this carrot versus the stick. Some of the stuff that requires to carry the stick or can be challenging. You guys have raised those issues. The carrot is what I think I'm most interested in, and that third bullet point that you guys have is something that has intrigued me, simply because I've learned a lot over the last couple of years about the types of trees that have more of a water absorbing effect. Right? If you got a river birch or a swamp oak, some of those things that some people say wreak havoc in terms of trying to keep a plush lawn because it soaks up so much water and it creates a challenge. Anyway, long story short, I look at that incentive in terms of trying to encourage people to plant the right types of trees to be very effective, because what I have noticed as I've driven around, not just in Falls Church but in other places, where you see a developer that has obviously taken and made the effort to plant more trees, simply, I think, plant the wrong types of trees given the lot and where those trees are located. And one that I typically see, which it's like you got a row of them and then there's always one that's dead, is that somebody that goes and plants a bunch of Leland cypress in an area that just is just too much water there. And they're ultimately going to die. So someone may hit the canopy coverage in terms of the, quantify the math associated with it. But I know in 3 years, it's like, oh, that's a wet spot. Those are all going to be dead eventually. The idea of incentivizing people to plant the right types of trees that make the most sense, whether it's benefit to stormwater, whether it's the canopy coverage overall, that are going to be longer lasting trees that are going to be here for a much longer period of time as opposed to growing for 10 or 15 years, and they either, it either starts to lean up against the side of the house, or they're just more prone to some of these more catastrophic events that we're having that are related to climate change. Trees that make the most sense to plant for development. So I like the idea of exploring incentives associated with planting the right types of trees, or what we deem to be a better fit for certain areas. The recipe that goes into that, I don't know, but I think that is something that is definitely worthwhile. And I do know from at least from a commercial real estate perspective, those types of incentives, as you had mentioned, not using the stick as a weapon and the trees as a weapon, but encouraging people through those incentives makes a lot more sense. The other thing, and I think I'd mentioned this in the last Urban Forestry Commission, and again, I don't know what necessarily the answer is, but I do like the idea of, we used to do this, or VPUS used to do this, where you had the historic preservation. I think Mary Beth Connolly actually has one on the side of her house, the historic preservation of the house. You've got a historic, the plaque? Right. So plaques related to some level of achievement related to either mature tree canopy, could be native species, could be a whole host of things. Taking it to that level, I feel like there are, at least knowing this community, there are people that would actively strive to hit that target of, you know what, I really want an Urban Forestry Commission silver plaque, gold plaque, platinum, whatever you call it, right? That puts these different grades, and I think you'd see people that would be very active in trying to hit those levels. And again, what the math or the formula is around it, I took a lot of pride when we did the re-landscaping in our house to try to solve for stormwater issues, and I think that there are a lot of other people that would like to do the same thing. And I think if you had, again, a formula as well as some type of award or plaque or achievement that carries with the life of the property, that you'd get a lot of people that would be willing to contribute and proactively do that. We've started to have those conversations in commercial real estate as it relates to sustainability and resiliency in buildings, almost like a passport that carries with the property. So not necessarily a LEED certification, but I've got a passport that shows all the things that we've done for this building that carries through. And people like the idea of being able to show that. Either it's like, hey, look what I did, or you kind of know what went into the history of the property. People can look at that and know exactly what has happened and the benefit that it's brought to the property. So I like the incentive side of that. I love the third bullet point. I like the idea of giving people something to try to achieve, a plaque or otherwise, or some type of other label that they could seek. But otherwise, I think all of these are very valid points, but I really like the incentive direction that you guys are taking.
Vice Mayor Connolly?
I think Ms. Hardy just mentioned this, but I'm not quite sure she said the exact same thing I wrote down, so I just want to make sure you get this. As we're talking about stormwater plans, we really need to make sure that we're including tree planting and preservation on all those plans. It's just as a thing. I think we need to make sure that we're always mentioning trees in going forward as we're looking at other issues that may not necessarily be specifically tree related. Thanks.
Mr. Duncan.
So I am sorry that the news press is not here to report on this jaw-dropping information, which, if I have it right, is that there is no correlation between the size of a house that's built and the number of trees cut down in the process.
It's within the city of Falls Church because all houses that are built are 25% of the lot size.
I guarantee you that if you went out on Broad Street and talked to 20 people, 18 would say that's just can't possibly be correct. I mean, that is a stunning piece of information. And I kind of hear what you're saying, but I kind of don't, because my impression is that, you know, my next door neighbor had a house just like mine, and while they didn't go, you know, mega house, they doubled the size. They only doubled the size of it when they bought it. And that seems kind of typical. Now, the number of trees is a bit separate from that, but still, I mean, I just encourage you to promulgate that information as broadly as possible, just so people are aware that that is the fact.
The actual driver is whether there were trees on the site beforehand, because we do have some large properties that are ripe for redevelopment that have very few trees on them.
Have many trees.
The other driver is where those trees are located. If they're anywhere near the center of the lot where the house is going to go, they're going to go. So those residential properties that have trees across the back are the most likely to have trees saved. But if they didn't have them, then regardless of the size of the house, they're not going to be able to save trees.
So that's hopeful. I mean, it's very important for us to be informed as much as possible about actual facts, not simply anecdotes or outliers.
Right.
And I feel like sometimes in this area, as in others, we are driven by anecdotes and outliers. And so I encourage you to pursue every means possible to make folks aware that that's the case. Second thought, so 46% is under tree canopy. So we're about 2.2 square miles. Does that mean that a little over 1 square mile actually has trees on it, not grass, but trees?
Canopy cover. So the tree can be surrounded by concrete, but cover a lot of land that's also covered by concrete. So yes, it does mean that that's how much canopy cover there is. I will say along those lines, we should be getting the most accurate data yet very soon. So we got LiDAR data just last week. Hasn't fully been processed so that our GIS person can do that. But the short answer is, in the past, we've gotten better and better data, but it's still taking a series of points and saying this point is tree, this is not, this is tree, this is not, and averaging it. The new data is literally measuring the literal canopy cover and not averaging anything. So that should be our best data yet. Again, making it hard for us to have a trajectory. So I have my fingers crossed that it's close to what we estimated it to be.
The data collection gets better, therefore, whatever pre-existed.
American Forest said that we had something like 20% canopy cover in the early 90s. I don't think that was true. I think it was bad data.
So at some point you just have to do, data not available, and we're starting from here with technology that we trust.
Right. So we have to find out what's the difference between our last and best estimate and the next better analysis. If they're similar, then maybe we can start to have a trajectory.
And in comparison now to your notes here say other jurisdictions, are other jurisdictions using the same kind of
No, they're using that point-by-point thing. Falls Church, for whatever reason, has this great LiDAR data that not all communities have.
Because we're special. That's why. Because we're special. Okay, and the other thought I had is in following on what Mr. Lichtenhouse said. So I'm interested in market incentives, or I don't know what you call his plaque proposal, but it's a nice idea. I mean, when I moved into my house 35 years ago, we cut some things down because there were some old lady bushes, my wife called them. But we planted tons of stuff, and probably too much. But we didn't tear anything down in the way of a tree, and we planted more trees. I'm interested that now.
You want your plaque now, Phil? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, exactly. I want my plaque.
All about you.
The amazing thing is my house is 72 years old. It's incredible. I live in a house that, anyway, that's not where I was going. But thank you. I'm struck by now when folks move into new properties. Well, first off, I perceive that they do tear down the little house and build a bigger house, whether or not they're, and that's a value statement. I mean, when we bought a small house, we basically kind of kept a small house. That's not the way it seems to work these days. And second, I'm struck by the number of people who, when they move in, they cut down trees, perfectly fine trees, because they don't want the limbs to fall on their kids, or they don't want to rake leaves, or they're not yard people and they just don't want the yard service to have. They just want to mow grass. And right on my border, there's a perfectly fine tree, which, in my view, captures stormwater and slows it down and so forth. It's not a specimen tree, but it's a nice big tree. And we've had discussions with neighbors about, well, you're allowed to cut that down because it's shading the garden. Like, okay, well, garden shade, stormwater, which of those two things, it's relative. What is going on that leads folks to want to move into town and cut trees down? Because that does happen. Not just anecdotally and outlierly.
Right.
What is it, and can certain other incentives, financial or otherwise, be applied to that? Because in my view, stormwater is the big problem.
Right.
Is there anything we could do from your perspective to?
I would say that, again, that's largely cultural. I would say that as we have this building boom, the turnover in Falls Church is fairly high. So maybe the old way of looking at Falls Church as a long-term community with its own values might be slipping a little. And so something like Ms. Hardy and Mr. Lichtenhaus suggested with awards to people or recognition for people who are doing a good job, it could probably go hand in hand with the community wildlife habitat. Mm-hmm. We've already got the community wildlife habitat designation, so you could start with, or maybe one of the points for your plaque would be, are you a community wildlife designated site? And then maybe add something on it from there, so that these programs would feed together, and that would help us keep that culture going. If this is a city program and a VPIS program, and everybody in the community knows about it, that helps keep that culture alive.
That's a good point to end on. Somebody just this afternoon sent me a question about, can we not have wildflower garden? Wildflowers in my front yard, or am I going to get in trouble for not mowing the grass for people? And I said, as far as I'm concerned, that sounds like community wildlife habitat butterflies go to. Get Sandy on the case, and off we go. So it would be good to wrap all those together and create some incentive program that would counter, I feel like, what is the modern thing, which is, I'm busy, I'm working, I'm paying my $1 million mortgage, and I don't have time to rake leaves.
Bottom line, it is private property, but if people want to be part of the community,
Where's that timer when I need it? Not a short one. I didn't give you a lecture. Anyway, we just want to keep the questions spread out around the group, and we appreciate those comments. We're back for quick, Phil. I didn't mean it. I know. Well, he's gone for the moment. All right.
Sorry, one more idea. So we've been talking about incentives for private landowners. How much of a dent can we make if we increase the number of trees in the right of way to get to that 50% kind of citywide coverage goal?
I'm not sure how much of a dent it would make in the 50% canopy coverage goal. It might give us 1 or 2%, but I think there are other reasons to do it. Pavement that's shaded lasts longer than pavement that's not shaded. If we want people to get out and exercise and meet each other and talk in the streets, they're going to have shaded sidewalks. So those two reasons are good reasons. The third reason that's a good reason is most street trees are in the right-of-way, so the city can assure that they will still be there. So yes, we do want to increase right-of-way plantings.
So that's where I'm going, because those are all excellent points. So while we can certainly reward and incent about medals and prizes and plaques, this is one that we can directly control. Yes. So to to date, we have a volunteer program through MIPUS and the neighbors' street trees. But if we were to increase the amount of street trees we want to plant and make it more city-led, I know that clearly would require more resources and dollars, but if you think you can actually move the needle and we can actually do something about it with city resources, is that something we would consider doing? Should we put more attention instead of making it only volunteer-led? Because I know we're constrained by the number of volunteers, especially
Right.
going out and digging holes.
That one is low-hanging fruit, and it is obvious to everyone, so it makes a big difference. Whether it moves the needle much on canopy cover or not, it makes a big difference because of perception. That this is a tree-lined city, and that people would expect to follow suit maybe in their own properties. If we don't let ours fall into low canopy coverage, then that helps.
The cultural part, I think, is important, right? So it sends a signal that something that's important to us. We invest in it. The city's willing to put dollars against it. So as we think about budget, I'd actually love input from you all of this is something that we should item towards instead of making it only a volunteer-led effort. When we put more city dollars against it, especially if we think it breeds the right culture and expectation in residential owners that they should do the same on their property. Yeah, and I don't know what that would require, but.
If I could just let the council be aware, we're actually putting together a grant application. It's a very small grant application to COG to help us develop an engineering spec for when we do traffic calming and have bump outs at intersections, have them designed with stormwater and soils for tree planting. And the goal with this, and again, this is a less than $10,000 grant, but just have a quick spec that when we do traffic calming, that to the contractor to so that it's not just traffic calming, but it's also green. And the arborist will need to be part of that, putting that spec together as well.
All right.
Do it, like, does that buy us like 50 more street trees plus the resources to go plant them? Like, do we have right of way for?
Well, if we need to pay someone to plant them, each tree would be $500 or $600. So $10,000 would buy you 20. If we can get volunteers, that saves. So that's the difference there, is that the labor costs just as much. That becomes difficult, but it's no, street trees I think are doable. They're not maybe a big enough line item in the budget right now, but I don't think it's very difficult to get it done. To do things that way.
All right. Mr. Snyder?
So I know when you all were here before, thanks a lot for great, very interesting. When you all were here before, you mentioned a desire to take a look at some commercial redevelopments, particularly mixed-use developments. So I'm wondering if in the future you might come forward with ideas for these. Well, they may be few in number, they're big in area. So thanks a lot.
I think no shortage of ideas.
And I do think that the commercial areas do set the tone for what our city is like.
So I've got a couple real quick questions. One with respect to trees and stormwater. I think if we're going to do incentives or consider how we want to promote that, it would be nice to have some more data. And so to my mind, for example, a tree will absorb water if you have like low flow, right? Like if you have a 3 inches over 2 days, it's going to suck up a lot of water. Although if you're talking about flooding, the purpose being flooding, that's not a huge help. You know, in other words, the flood is kind of a very quick inundation, which is, if that's not, trees probably, in my mind, don't help a whole lot. They probably help a lot with water quality. In other words, sucking it through and absorbing it as opposed to sending it down some concrete pipe. But in terms of quantity control, I would imagine on like rapid storms like July, they probably don't do a whole ton, but I would love to have some data, some information about that. In other words, how much does a tree, Drew, if you get 5 inches over 3 hours, does it really move the needle? You know, it may not. It may move the needle tremendously on quality. In other words, getting phosphorus and other things out of the stormwater system, but I'm not sure it does so much on quantity when you have that big rapid rain. But I would love to have some data so we can make better decisions based on the what the engineers tell us. As I think a lot of it's just assumption. Oh, tree's great for stormwater. It is probably for quality. I'm not sure it is for a big storm like we had last summer. But I'd be interested in the information you all have.
Right. So very detailed data are going to depend on soils and tree types and
I got
things,
it,
but
but-
generic data are available,
Yes.
and I can bring
That would be good to know. Secondly, as relates to street trees, I agree. I think we've kind of missed an opportunity here in the city. And I think part of the problem is that our streets aren't really designed in many ways to have sidewalks and street trees and kind of a full, complete street. But I would love to get more towards that with more sidewalks, but also as part of our design to add sidewalks in places we're going to add street trees as well. And just kind of do that complete look. But I would love to find a way to get more street trees along our thoroughfares. I mean, I think the cities would just look great with that. Let me see what else I've got. I think that's probably. Let me just ask one last quick question. On the new developments, the street trees that go in, who maintains those? Is it the developer for 1 year, like a warranty period, or does it go on to perpetuity for the developer, or does the city maintain them off the get-go?
Okay, it depends. So if there's room in the right-of-way, they plant the tree in the right-of-way. All trees on new developments are bonded for 1 full year,
Yeah.
so that's essentially a 1-year warranty. So the city will not maintain it until the year is up.
Gotcha, but we maintain
If it's in
it
the right-of-way, we
afterwards.
maintain it afterwards.
Okay.
If they don't have room in the right-of-way, they can plant a tree within 15 feet of the street to function as a street tree, and then the city never takes it over.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That's all I've got. Does anyone else have anything else? Mr. Z, you have anything?
Actually, I do, but I think we've greened this topic enough already.
Okay. How about Mr. Szymanski? Do you guys, your gang, have some more comments for us or thoughts? Or
I want to take 5 minutes and
Yeah.
just talk about the Urban Forestry Commission staff, supporting staff priorities for 2020. And based on the conversation that we've had and what we've shown you up here, we've already hit on most of it. But one in particular I wanted to bring up is one raised up question about data kind of comes up. We have talked about the need to have a repository of all of our urban forest related data in one place. So one of our priority initiatives for 2020 is to work on developing a data repository so that it's a one-stop shop for all urban forest related information.
did anyone else on the commission have any comments for us? Questions, thoughts, things we can do better, things we can do together, recommendations you all have?
I am pleased with how much that the board did just let it. It's about responsibility.
Thank you. We appreciate the great work you all do, and I think this council and also our community loves trees, and we want to do what we can to find a way to support them and increase the number and the canopy, etc. So let's keep talking. All right. Thanks very much. All right, Mr. Shields, let's move on. We do have a closed session, by the way, after our next item. All right, Mr. Shields. Could you suggest $1 million?
Yeah, my microphone on. Sorry. In all of the value engineering and de-scoping that we did as part of that, the original pricing for the City Hall project was about $17 million, and we worked really hard to scope those costs to bring them down to 13.35. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of those cuts that we made were unwise, and they came back to bite us, and we're paying for it now. I will also acknowledge that HIT Construction struggled with this project as well and absorbed a lot of costs on its end. And at this point, I do need to thank HIT Construction for their collaboration on this project and for their work to really negotiate with us on this $1,270,000 change order number. With that number, there are a lot of costs that HIT absorbed under the construction manager risk. I also want to thank the city attorney and the outside legal counsel for advising us through those negotiations, which took many months, and it just resolved last week. Some of the key things in terms of lessons applied to the library project, having a complete scope that's embraced in the guaranteed maximum price. And so specifically the big ones that were not in the guaranteed maximum price for HIT construction included IT and low voltage. That was not part of the original design that Studio 27 did for the city. It was not part of their bid, and we arranged to have that work done outside of the HIT contract. So we had HIT doing its work and our contractors going in to do all the low voltage. That's a strategy that maybe would have been acceptable in the 1990s, or maybe as recently as 15 to 12 years ago. But in this building, with all of the sophisticated systems for the police department, for the judges, the televisions, the security cameras, keyless locks, the data drops, the audio visual, there's so much of it that it had a major impact on the construction of the building. When you're talking about conduits now these days, low voltage conduits are very large in terms of just the space they take up. That has an impact on the actual construction. So having that as a carve out of the GMP and something we do separately was something that we're not doing for the library. It's all wrapped in one design, one contractor would be overseeing all of that work. Security also was outside the GMP and handled separately through the LP ComSec. Also, having plans go through permitting review for the library is how we've done that. The City Hall project didn't get its building permits until we had the contract price approved in December, and they didn't get their final building permits until May. Their plans through the construction really had to wrestle a lot with changes that came through the permitting process. Now, that's under the Seymour contract. That is on the it's also on the designer to have plans that expect or meet code. Nonetheless, through that permitting review, there were lots of changes. Continuity of our project team members over the life of the project. All of the major project managers on the construction side, as well as the city side, changed. The city, we lost our project manager about halfway through. The HIT team actually changed right after the pre-construction period, and the whole team switched out. We were reassigned internally to other projects that HIT was running right at the beginning of construction. That caused significant communication problems and understanding problems as the project moved through. We have in the contract to the Centennial for the library provisions that the staff assigned to this project not be reassigned. They leave the company. Can't be reassigned to other projects that Centennial is managing. We've also had final Bright Blood is now leading this project is complete as well. But we are working hard to make that continuity work for the library project. Utilities were a problem for the City Hall project, most notably our water line that we ended up providing a new water service for the project. That became a big point of conflict during the construction process, which got resolved through the closeout that was negotiated closed last week. But we've done all the sewer and water utility inspections. We don't anticipate that to be an issue in the library. They meet the fire flows, etc. Contingency, we had $48,000 in owner's contingency for the City Hall project. That was obviously inadequate. The library has a 5% owner's contingency and 5% Seymour contingency.
What's the comparison between the two amounts of contingency?
So for this library project, there's a 5% Seymour and 5% owners. For the City Hall project, there's a 4% Seymour contingency, essentially less than 1% contingency. Quality assurance and quality control requirements and processes. We had about 1,000 punch list items in the City Hall project. For the library project, we will our inspections will be on a regular basis. Our project manager will be on site every day. We will not have a punch list for the library like we do for the City Hall project. But there were major disagreements on the City Hall project with respect to our HVAC systems. That was the last issue to resolve. It contract, to its credit, is fixing all the issues with HVAC. That work is also underway. That is encompassed at $1.2 million settlement. That's a summary of lessons applied, but everybody on our staff has lived the City Hall project, and we're carrying that experience into the library project. It's not to say there won't be new issues that will come up in the library, but I think our team is primed to get people quickly, not have them sort of snowball up through something the project managers holding close, rather just share it, solve the problem. Shifting to the library project itself, we have executed the contract with they have signed. I have signed the contract. Performance bonds are now in process. Today, the library closed for moving. In early March, the temporary library will open at TJ Elementary School. So why 2 weeks for closure? And the reason for that is that every item in the library will be touched, inventoried, and will be designated for what will go to storage and what will go to the TJ Elementary School. Now, there's been a lot of pre-planning for that, so the whole plan is known how that will be done, but it is time consuming to go through this physically, get it all allocated and cataloged, inventoried, and sent to where it's supposed to be. And the shelves are empty. The old shelves will be moved to TJ and then restocked, and all the other materials as well. So there is a process that we have to go through for that to happen. But that's going very well, and so our press release on it is early to mid-March. Speaking with the library director, early March, but we'll get a date set very soon. March 16th is the date of construction beginning on the library. You will see activity there, fencing going up, mobilization in advance of March 16th. The formal pre-construction meeting is on March 11th. We have it a little bit close to construction starting because we have a lot of submittals that we have in advance of that formal pre-construction. The construction is a 14-month construction. June 2021, the library opens. I'll just note that a much more detailed schedule will be put out there soon. Project managers working that out. And one last thing I would just note, I've put before the council just a write-up of a proposal to formalize the oversight for the library construction project. And in that write-up is fairly simple, but the basic idea is to open up the oversight process and bring in the city council, potentially 2 members of the library board, a member of the planning commission, along with the city manager and the library director who will be part of this oversight committee. The appointments would be made by the city council. It would be a committee that would last through the project unless it's extended by city council. The charter is to provide regular communication and oversight of the library construction project status and progress. They would meet on a monthly basis with the city's project manager to be briefed on the project schedule, the percent of work completed, percent of payments made, change order log, use of contingency, a 30-day look ahead on the project. Just have a regular meeting and regular communication on the status of that project. A couple of notes with this committee. We do want to affirm, sort of reinforce the fact that all is done through the project manager. That line of communication is very important for a well-managed project. And so the committee would be expected to observe and promote that chain of communication. And I would also ultimately the city manager is accountable for the performance of this project, and the existence of the committee would in no way alter that line of accountability. It's really designed to out to discuss things openly and transparently, so people understand how we're doing on this project. And so that's an item for discussion, feedback from the city council tonight. That's what I wanted to present tonight.
All right, sounds good. Questions, comments? Mr. Snyder?
So let me go back to the City Hall project for a minute. I made this request before, and I'll make it again. I'd like the list of the change orders that we think we're responsible for. Large numbers, say we started with $1,000. to see that before we vote on it. Second thing is, who did the project manager for that project work for? Who supervised the project manager?
So the project manager was an engineer with the City Department of Public Works,
Ultimately working for you.
ultimately reporting to me. And that's correct.
Another question I have is the safety issue. So this project was really driven by safety considerations, the police department and the judges. So what steps were taken to have the safety elements approved by the judges and the police department? And what is it that now we have a sheriff's office and the judges coming back and saying, well, the council chambers aren't really what we wanted from a safety standpoint? So maybe you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, you're absolutely right. So the process during the plan development time was to have essentially all the user groups sign off on the plans. And so the sheriff signed off on the plans, the clerk of court signed off on the plans, the judges signed off on the plans. I think where the breakdown is the users in many instances weren't well informed enough or didn't pay close enough attention to the specifics of the plans. And in the area of security cameras or low voltage layouts, those are extremely complex plans, and it's not normal for a layperson to actually know what they're signing off on with respect to those. The things that we're fixing with respect to the judges and the sheriff's concerns in the clerk of court, the sheriff has requested ballistic doors at the entrance to the sheriff's department, and they've requested an additional door between the council chambers and the bathroom. I would state that those are things that they should have understood when they looked at the plans. And so that is an example of one where I've asked the sheriff to cover that in the sheriff's budget, because those are changes that they signed off on the plans. They should have seen that. I think maybe there's some arguments back and forth, but in any event, I'm not asking for the council for a budget amendment for that. I've asked the sheriff to find ways in the sheriff's budget to cover those costs. The clerk of court, similarly, what they're requesting is ballistic protection on the front of their area, and also ballistic protection to the windows looking in. We're working through the final designs for those, and that's a case where I think in that instance we had a clerk change, and the new clerk has been requesting those items, and we're working with the new clerk to try to accomplish them as cost effectively as possible. But again, that would be covered under our existing operating budget as opposed to requesting an additional appropriation. Those are a couple of examples of those changes.
So let me end with this: is this building up to current safety standards with regard to fire, active shooter situations? Is this building now up to where it ought to be, or are there other things we should really want to get this done right?
So let me first answer the question sort of more broadly. In terms of the safety of this building, there are major improvements to this building. One, it is sprinklered throughout. That is a major improvement for an old building not to be sprinklered. That's great for safety. The police, in terms of their objectives of having a secure sally port, having a secure garage, having sort of the whole flow of the police department and how they operate, very significant improvements. The way that the court will operate will be significant improvements. There's the segregation of pathways for those who are being brought straight from the jail to appear in court versus the general public. There are meeting spaces so that attorneys can meet with their clients in private. Witnesses can discuss cases with the attorneys in private without the accused seeing who's discussing with attorneys. So those are all major improvements to the operations of the courts and public safety. The changes that we're paying for here are in the systems, the camera systems, all the keyless lock systems, and basically just low voltage security systems in general. That is kind of major changes that we're paying for with this settlement.
So if I could, Mr. Schultz, I think for the improvements in the code, we also did the customer service counters with windows or protected counters. Some of the changes for security and card access, I think, are refinements post the original design just because of the current conditions where we're seeing active shooters. And so with having our emergency manager and police department, police chief look at it, there are some refinements in that arena just because of the environment situations changed to make sure that we're a safe building. Like another way out of chambers, for instance.
So when I asked, is the building has renovated up to standards, not only fire, but safety, gun safety standards, if you will, are we where we need to be with this building?
Let me answer it this way. For a public building like a city hall, it's very tough for a determined assailant with a firearm to defend against that. To both be a place that is open for business and open for democratic civic work, and at the same time to be secure in the fullest sense. That there's two very different things to square. This building does have more glass, it has more transparency, it has more visibility. That cuts two ways. On one hand, you can see danger and get away from it faster. On the other hand, an assailant can see you and come to you and shoot through glass. So I've been sitting in on meetings we've been having with staff since Virginia Beach, where staff are asking these exact same questions, and they're serious questions. And we're working through to be responsive to staff concerns while also balancing what I think our mission is, which is to be forward-facing to the public and accessible to the public. There are things that other jurisdictions are coming to us to learn from. For instance, having the public area open, but to get back into workspaces, Fairfax City and Herndon and Vienna, for instance, they're all coming to us to see how we're doing that because they're all battling with it as well. They want to maintain accessibility, but there also needs to be some separation where the staff workspaces are in the public. And I think they're looking to us in terms of how we've tried to solve that problem. It's something they're going to be moving towards.
And I think the cameras are an important piece of that because with lessons learned from different situations, sometimes you also have to be locked down a certain area that normally is only available to staff. Also, you want to make sure your public safety can get to there, and that was a lesson learned from Virginia Beach, so our card access program is really robust in programming it. And not part of the CIP project for City Hall, but a separate CIP project, but related to your question, is we've upgraded our PBX phone system, and every phone now has a button programmed as a panic button, and it will ring into dispatch. So we have much more ability for notification dispatch if there's an emergency situation in the building.
So what I'm hearing is it's possible.
I think we will constantly need to evolve, and I think this project accomplished its mission statement, but the world is changing, and we will need to change with it over time as well.
There is also an FY22, a CIP project that would be looking at all our other facilities for card access and cameras that the police chief has put forward, because we also need to look at our other facilities for those same kind of controls of access and monitoring.
All right, are you Mr. Z? Did you have something? I'm sorry, I thought you were.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we are at being very close to the end of the City Hall project. And how we got here is long and arduous, and it's I think that that being able to get out from underneath this is with these costs are completely appropriate. I quite frankly expected this to have a much more deleterious outcome than it does, and so I think the city manager has has taken to heart the lessons learned, and so if I have something to say about the library project oversight committee, that I think it is pretty close to what we want. I would add one member of the public, and I assume that the appointments committee will weigh in on accepting applications from council and library board and applying a member of the public if my suggestion holds. There are probably a few things I would want clarification on. For example, project schedule, what's will be reported and that will be included. This should not be an onerous thing, but quite frankly, I expect a frank and open discussion on the progress. I would add the QAQC execution piece, how that's going. To Mr. Snyder's point, I think it's when he calls for major change orders, I think you'll find it a huge basket of small change orders. In the end, it became overwhelmingly incomprehensible. You don't build the world's biggest ball of string by starting out with a very thick rope. It just accretes by itself, and then the next thing you know, you have something worthy of Guinness Book of Records. Just looking at the project schedule, and the reason for that is, I would like to be able to set a potential first meeting. Before leaving this proposal, I would say that absolutely this oversight committee is not in the management chain of command. It is to perform oversight and to advise council on what it sees and to report to that, and perhaps spare council the necessity of all of us sitting together and hearing these things once a month. Maybe we could cut out every 25 words, and what this committee would bring would be something of value. And of course, we'll have better understanding and visibility on how it's going. So let me just say that I think the first meeting ought to come very close to the commencement of the pre-construction conference, which if it's March 11th, is the third week, excuse me. No, it's second week, middle of the second week in March. So we ought to meet beforehand. Looks like the critical question I would ask is, when will the site be available to the contractor? I don't think it's probably March 2nd, March 3rd. We don't actually know yet, do we? But it's something we should be knowing. Now that's probably less than 2 weeks away. Someone ought to call Centennial and say, "Hello, when are you going to put up your fence? When's the library going to..." They're going to say, "When's the library going to be ready to turn over the facility to us?" And there has to be that. Here's the key. Hasta la vista. And that's missing from the schedule. So I would like to have affirmation of that, to pass it out to council, so that we'll be asked, when does that transition happen, and we ought to be able to talk about it. Other than that, I look forward to a successful commencement of forward-facing library project, complete with all the dentiles on the roof line that Mr. Lichtenhouse likes so much.
All right. Speaking of which, Mr. Lichtenhouse, what you got?
Dan, you assume with what you're talking, you're one of the city council members who will serve on that oversight?
I wouldn't say no.
Say no?
I would say yes.
Check the box on that one. A couple quick questions related to the library. Where's the construction staging take place? The excavators, things like that. Where are they going to park those things?
That's a question for the project manager. So every square inch of that site is going to be used, including the sidewalks. They need the sidewalks for the project. So the fencing is going to be right behind face of curb. We're not going to be able to maintain open sidewalks through this construction process. We do. We need a ped crossing on that third leg, that fourth leg, and so we will be looking at that.
The security scope and the GMP with the C1, they put cameras in the library. They have planned for enough servers. So those things take a lot of space.
We do.
They're going to be actively monitored by law enforcement, or are they just going to be recording in case there's an incident so they can go back and look at the tape?
It's confidential.
That can't be confidential. Come on.
There's a live feed into dispatch, but dispatch has a lot going on. So, and we also have a lot of cameras. So the answer is both, but understanding that it will be probably principally used for after the fact.
So knowing the conversation that I had with Jamal last week for the conversation about the additional money for IT that was requested last week, he had indicated that if police department and other security cameras throughout the city were required to be held on servers, that was going to cost additional money and require additional space. So hopefully that the library has been contemplated in that, because that's a lot of tape.
Yeah, for this type of recording, it's held for a set period of time, and it's built into the storage for the SANs. The type of recording he was speaking to you about was more of an video recording, interviews or any other car camera videos, and those will be in this sort of more simple NAS.
What's the requirement in terms of how long we have to keep that data? I think
For the police data?
for the library.
The library, right now we're running on a 30-day for
That's
here
basically-
and library, and any future facility that we install cameras on. But they are live into dispatch, and they can switch the screens. It's web-based. It's recorded, and it connected with the panic button. So if a staff pushes a panic button, they can quickly get to the camera.
Back to the construction staging, I would assume that there's going to be some disruption to the condo building next door, and probably more than likely, if I was a betting man, that construction workers that are coming to that site will be parked all over the place. Some may be parking in that parking lot next to the library. Won't let them do that, but
Yeah, that
just be very clear about that. I feel like the graciousness of the building owners over there, the condo owners, they're probably going to wear thin during the construction process. That's an issue that I've raised with the library board from the beginning. They better get that wire tight. There's going to be some serious problems, I think. It's going to get really dirty, noisy, very, very congested over there. So, all right, going back to the overrun for the city hall. I've raised this issue before. I know we had a project manager that left halfway through, and it looks like he had pulled a bait and switch on their personnel early on in the project. But it still bothers me that there's been very little culpability associated with our architect in terms of the planning and the design and some of the things that are missing. I've raised this issue before that I find it quite disturbing that we would give an architecture firm that was involved in the design process a pass on missing certain things. I mean, there's a certain fiduciary responsibility, professional responsibility to catch things like that, especially when it is a public safety project. And so I raise that issue in terms of where we hold those folks accountable in that process, and how we may be able to recoup some of these costs. Because it is something that's missed, and it's something that you said earlier about sign off from the various departments. Yeah, I would say it is true that most of the departments are not going to be able to look at electrical schematics, low voltage, security, plumbing, rough ends, whatever, and be able to figure it out. But I would assume if the architect was doing their job that they would have been in those meetings walking through the plans, pointing things out. Did that happen, or were the plans literally sent around and kind of hard CAD copy, and folks were just looking at it and saying, yeah, it looks good or it doesn't look good?
The architect and the project manager were in all the meetings.
I just find it really, really difficult, maybe not to believe, but to stomach the idea that you had an architect and a project manager sitting in with the heads of our department, and things that were very critical to the delivery of this project were missed. And again, that goes back to the fact that someone from a professional perspective, I think, is more culpable than we may be putting their feet to the fire on. I want to clarify one thing related to the slide 4 about adding the capital reserves. I just want to be clear that I understand this. We're not technically adding money back to capital reserves. We're just not moving that money from a baseline, correct? It's not like we're adding to it, correct? It's just we're taking out less.
Well,
We're putting back in some of which we thought we were going to have to take out more, but it's not like we're padding our capital reserves.
So
correct?
when we did this year's budget, we appropriated a full use of 2.895 from the capital reserve, so which was taken out of the reserve and appropriated in the budget. Of that, we used 150 on the West Falls Church, and of the remaining, in addition to the 453,000 that was left in the last budget amendment, we're using a 1.3 addition to that, and the remaining 2,197,111 will be, as a budget journal, it's a technical entry, will be sent back to the reserve. So we were anticipating to end the capital reserves at 14.8 million. With this additional 2 million, we will end this. We're projected to end the current fiscal year, June 30th, 2020, at 16.8.
Just better off than we thought we were going to be. And then I did have one last question about City Hall, or something to point out. And I noticed this yesterday. I was up at the Treasurer's Office of Commissioner of Revenue, and in terms of these protected counters, what was the reason for having 2-inch ballistic glass in front of the Treasurer but not in front of the Commissioner of Revenue?
That actually was the user's decision. So, in those meetings, and the commissioner can speak to it. If I misspeak, please correct me. But I think in those meetings with the architect and the project manager, that's where those decisions were made, and the treasurer wanted it, and the commissioner did not. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't say I necessarily have an issue with it. It just there's definitely a stark feeling between the two, right, in terms of the communication. And I wrote most of my checks to Tom, not to the other side. So if I was going to be upset at somebody, to get Tom, not at Jody's office. I can just come right over the counter.
What I was kind of concerned about, if we were going to do that, I would like to have seen it done for all public counters across City Hall. Then it would have been more equitable, people would have understood. And that is the exact reason I said no. It was a very hard decision. I talked to my staff about it. It was the ability to hear people and then communicate. And as you look like at Bergen Herbert Bank, they have a person outside of the glass sitting in a little circular desk. I think because of that communication kind of reason. So I think microphones and stuff try, but it's really hard to hear people and understand them. And we shuffle paper too, so there's a physical part.
I get that, and I think the ironic thing about the ballistic glass that we have up there is that the door that leads to the back, which is glass as well, is not ballistic. Right? There's a door that's next to the treasurer's office. We've got 2-inch thick ballistic glass. That door is not ballistic.
We swapped out the door so it's not a glass door anymore. The one that enters the suite.
The one up there.
Or the hallway. The
No.
hallway's glass. The suite door we swapped out because it used to be regular glass.
It's a solid. Ballistic door or just a solid steel?
It's a steel field is it rated? It has a rating.
Yeah, it was reviewed and approved by the police chief, but I can't remember the rating either, so I don't want to misspeak.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing all this. I know it's an uncomfortable conversation to have to talk about overruns and lessons learned, but hopefully we are learning from it. Can we go back to slide 3? So if I'm understanding this correctly, once we pay for the $1.2 million now, that will get courts back in and get City Hall 100% up and running. So as I understand it, courts are due back in April and May, and we still have some police that are not fully in yet. Do we have any other outstanding costs? Because I feel like we've had this conversation each time we look at this list of, oh, now we need another X amount. So is this it?
Yes.
That is the right answer. Thank you. Refresh my memory on what is our kind of lifespan in terms of both capacity for City Hall workers, number of seats, workspaces, parking spaces for this building. So now that we've put in $20 million, is this going to last us 25 years?
Well, I will say at the rate that staff are asking for additional staff, we're in budget meetings right now, and there are a lot of requests out there for additional staff. I don't think many, if any, are going to be approved in the budget that I present to you, but that demand is there, that sort of pressure is there. And where I think it stems from is staff wanting to be as responsive as they possibly can. But what we have to work through as an organization is to sort that out without constantly increasing your staff. Remembering that we are a city of 14,000 people, we just can't do things like Fairfax County, do them in a different way. I will say that the size of this building was made intentionally and strategically, that we can't grow and have huge increase in staff for our taxpayers. So in our original feasibility studies, we came to the council with big expansions of footprint. We worked those through and discussed them in a very sort of long, forward-thinking way that we can't continue to have our staff just constantly expand. So with that caveat, yes, this building should be properly sized.
And we did purposely go more with the systems furniture, some flexibility, because you can have one department's needs change to another's, and so the goal would be that we could adapt. And then from the physical, HVAC and the construction piece, we're looking at the 25, 30-year life cycle for most of that.
Well, I appreciate from a budget perspective, we're not adding more mouths to feed, because that does get expensive. I'm hearing you say that we are right-sized, so we are not out of room, right? So if we did have to add a staff person to the next couple of years, we're not out of room. And all the infrastructure should last us 20 plus years as well. So you're not going to come back and say, well, we need a new roof, we need new HVAC systems. On the lessons learned, so while I'm glad that we've actually go back, slide 4 on capital reserves, to build off of what Ross was saying, make sure I'm understanding. So because we did not take out the original time frame, took it out 6 months later, we are not spending $4.5 million in debt service that we thought we needed. So if we didn't have budget amendments 2 or 3, we'd be putting $4.5 million in the reserve. We'd use it after all. Because we had budget amendment 2, which included the library, and then now budget amendment 3 proposed for City Hall, instead of putting $4.5 million in reserves, we're only putting 1.9 in reserves. Is that correct? Lessons learned, side 5. So while I'm glad that we are not going to make the same mistakes again, so shame on us if the library does not have low voltage or security included in their plans, because we clearly should not make that same mistake again. I would encourage us to actually ask the why question a little deeper. So, for example, why were the plans incomplete? Why was the architect not competent? Why was our project manager not doing it? Were we rushing through things? Were we not checking through credentials? There's probably a bunch of deeper questions, because I think that will actually address the root cause to prevent things from happening again. Because I appreciate that we're actually looking at those things again and we won't make those mistakes, but until we actually ask that next level of why, I do worry that there'll be other unforeseen things. So in the staff report, for example, I read that we had unforeseen conditions with an older building and inadequate plans. It was the call outs I think in the staff report. The library has the same conditions. Right? It's an older building. We're probably going to face similar unforeseen things. Do we feel good that the 5 and 5 contingency will take care of that? Or is there extra diligence that we can put in now to prevent those issues from coming up? So, not being in construction or knowing enough about the library building, I don't know the answers to these things, but I would just again encourage us to ask the why beyond the one level beyond what's up there currently. Moving up to slide 6, the milestones. So when the temporary location opens up, is that when we can expect that fellows will be demolished and the temporary parking lot put up there as well?
Whether we will, that area can be used for parking for staff now. If the demolition doesn't occur by March, when the library opens, then the staff will probably have to stay away from it for the 3 or 4 days while that house is being demolished.
As it stands, it's kind of in our neighborhood. It's really quite busy on Oak already, and so we haven't already notified people about all the extra activity that's going to be happening. Good to do that. And then I have some concerns about the sidewalk closures. So while I understand to do the library work, we have to close the sidewalk. It's really busy on town, especially on the weekend. So I don't know what we can do to help people get across safely besides adding that 4th leg. I think there's extra attention. The pediatrician's office is right there. Clearly lots of busy things happening in the shopping center as well. So the sidewalk closure will be pretty, the people have been hard to acutely felt. So more attention to that, paid to them, hopefully. That's it for now. Thank you.
All right, what else we got? Vice Mayor.
That sidewalk closure, I wonder if we need to put another crosswalk at the other end of the library wide. Because if people are coming up Virginia, they need to get across to the other side. At the pediatrician's office or at the entrance to the north side. So Liberty Barbecue parking lot there. As a crosswalk. Okay. My questions. I've got a lot of questions. I'm just going to start with the simple one here. With the library temporarily moving to Thomas Jefferson, can you ensure that Lionel's the project manager on that part too, correct?
Yes.
Can he be in touch with the principal at Thomas Jefferson and just make sure that everyone at TJ knows what's going on as well, so that they can be letting teachers know and parents and other users the hours of the library and other things that will affect the day-to-day logistics at TJ. Because they all know it's coming, but it would be good if they knew, like, it's coming on Tuesday, or they'll be moving trucks here on this day, all those kind of things.
Yes. I think that communication is happening, but I will
Can you ensure that
double
it
check.
is? Thank you. Okay. I think that's all I have for now.
All right, Mr. Duncan.
Okay, I know we're trying to get to a closed session, so I'll be quick. First thought, my thoughts are all in the area of communications, which of course is what you would expect. I think it's important that in the communications that we issue pretty soon, as in before Letty writes her blog, that we underscore what was said about the improvements in the security and safety and convenience of the building, just because there are people out there who read the internet and not of them all are good people, and I think we need to begin to convey a message that the place that we have built for the public to come do its business and the staff to work is in fact, if not a hard target, but at least a more resilient structure. Things will obviously have to evolve as threat conditions change. Someday I believe we will have an armed guard at the door screening everyone who comes in, but we're not there yet. At any rate, I think it is important to convey that message. 2, the lessons applied is a very good slide. Everything you said to narrate it is very good. If I were your OCOM, I would just simply sit down and transcribe what you wrote or what you said and put it out in a not lengthy but thorough, bullet-pointed news release that assures the community, those at least in the community who are not confident that we have learned lessons from the City Hall, that here they are. And I would just say what you said. Third, I think the school's done a terrific job of informing those of us who don't go up there every day how that project is going, and I would hope that our communications on the city side would certainly come out once a month after attending that monthly meeting of the working group and update through the city channels everything that is said about how the library project is coming. Fourth and finally, the City Hall of the future is a topic worthy of consideration, I think. It's just not realistic to expect that an organization like ours, which is growing and dynamic, is not going to need more space, and probably sooner than any of us think. I'm sure all of us have worked with companies in times of growth. The newsroom at CQ where I worked transitioned completely 3 times in the years I was there. And my wife's place at Pew, they move everybody about every 2 or 3 years. That's just by way of saying, once the library, I guess, gets built and we get that out of our way, I would like to see us take advantage of the knowledge that this group has gained about how our operation works and how to make it more efficient and safe, and try to develop a near-term plan. Near-term, I mean like 5 years, for what it is that we're going to do with staff that is not going to fit in the current building. As the manager said, at least when I came on to council, there was serious consideration of big expansions of the footprint that were presented, proposed, considered, and rejected. So we got the City Hall that we had 4 votes to get. It is not going to be the City Hall for all time. I think that's all.
All right, I've got a couple quick comments. One, is there liquidated damages provision for delays in our library contract?
Yes.
Okay, good. How much do we pay our architects for City Hall?
A&E altogether was $1,400,000.
That's also engineering though, right? So
The architect contract was 1.2. I'm going off of memory.
Okay. With respect to that sidewalk closure, I think that is significant as well in front of the library. I don't know if we could even build a temporary sidewalk. It's done regularly in construction projects where you just take a little bit of the street and you put a, plywood sidewalk, and in lieu of that, some kind of temporary, thing. So because people are going to do that, you got kids all over the place around there, and for a year and a half or whatever it's going to take, you got parades, all sorts of things. To me, some kind of temporary bollards or something that you could put in and lose parking for a little bit wouldn't be the end of the world. That would be my recommendation. If you are going to close the sidewalk, I would put signs across the street so people don't cross the street and go, oh geez, I can't go, let me go back the other way. So anyway, something to keep in mind. I think also I would just say this idea of we're going to close pretty soon. I mean, keep in mind it's a library, right? It's like a major civic building. It matters to a lot of people. If you got 3 kids, that's the place to go. If you got young kids, that's where the action is at Falls Church. And so, we're going to close. I think you really got to keep in mind a schedule and getting that library open as soon as you can. And I mean, even days. Like, hey, today, you doing anything over there? I walked by, I looked in to see what was going on, and I get it. It's just day 1, but I'd like to see stuff. No wasted days. The library is really important to a lot of folks in town. Is there any staff savings? I mean, I can't imagine they're using the same staff in the trailers as they are, or needing the same staff in the trailers as they do for the building as it is now. Are there any staff savings?
I think there are some vacancies that they've chosen not to fill during this transition period, so there are some savings.
So is there going to be some accrual of savings to the city?
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what vacancies they have right now, but I know there are some.
That's correct. There are vacancies. I do not know the magnitude of the savings that'll be, but they also have the maintenance of effort that they have to match based on the state aid that we get.
Maintenance of effort.
For the library budget, for the state aid that we get, you have to show that they are not spending less than, like the previous year becomes the benchmark for them.
I got you, but doesn't they take into account when you shut down your library?
Sure,
I mean,
and
it seems like that would be a relevant
And we have
consideration.
had situations even opposite where we have had to spend less or more, and we've made a case, and it has worked. So
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine we have to spend, I wouldn't think that'd be prudent to spend what we spent last year just for that. Like, I would imagine we could explain that
Understood,
to
yeah.
somebody. And so if we can save ourselves $100,000 or whatever it might be, let's do it. The last comment is just a quick editorial about using reserves for other purposes. I think we ought to not get in that habit. I'd like to see us, quote, pay it back from what we've used already. Even though it may be more than we forecast originally, I don't like the idea of dipping into reserves to pay for some of the things we just paid for, and I don't want to get in the habit of doing that. And everyone else can speak for themselves, but I have concern about doing that. So I would just suggest going forward, you use great hesitation in doing that, at least to my mind. Anyway, that's all I got. Anyone else have anything else? All right. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. We do have a closed session right now, and why don't we, unless there's any additional comments that people want to make, are there any comments,
I'm
council
sorry,
comments?
just so at the next meeting, this language that's here will be proposed.
For the oversight committee, is that what you're asking?
The ordinance, the TO20-03 is going to be on our next full meeting agenda.
Yeah, I'm fine with, I don't know what other people think about the suggestions Dan made to the committee. I don't know if everyone else is okay with those as well.
So we're going to approve it on the 24th and then ask for Library Board Planning Commission and City Council to give us a member.
So he's talking about adding a citizen, just from the general public. Dan suggested that. And so, I mean, I don't know, I'm personally okay with that. I don't know if everyone else is as well. Yeah, like, it sounds like everyone's okay with that. And then I can't remember the other changes you made, adding an item or two for what they're doing. Yeah. Okay. I think, Mr. Shields, I think we're okay. It sounds like council's okay with that. Mr. Duncan, do you have another comment about the thing? All right. Vice Mayor Conley, do you have anything? Good, Mr. Snyder.
Scheduling comments?
Yeah, that's where we're on right now.
I do. Yes.
Okay.
All right. This is a traffic calming question. Someone asked me today about traffic calming on Little Falls Street.
That was me.
That was you. Between Shadow Walk and Columbia. So there was great concern. This person didn't know anything about what was going on in their neighborhood. They said other people didn't know either. It's far along in the process. I was like, I've never heard of Columbia, Shadow Walk, Little Falls traffic calming. I just looked on the map. It's on the map.
Yes.
But has it gone through the neighborhood traffic calming process?
Mm-hmm. And we've combined Great Falls and Little Falls together, and Jeff is currently working to schedule the community meeting to come back with the concept plans. So they've had the petition, some initial work, and just pending the funding, which you approved in the recent budget amendment. Now we'll reconvene the group because we're waiting for funding. He's going to host it at Columbia Baptist, and this Thursday I'll have an update on if they were able to schedule the date and then a message out.
So this person lives on Shadow Walk and knew nothing about anything happening and was quite concerned.
Yeah, so I'll follow up with Jeff. If you have a specific contact, we'll be glad to make sure we're on the distribution.
Okay.
I think there is someone on our listserv who's been coordinating. I'm trying to stay out of it. I don't want to look like
Right.
We do have a prime, working group member that's our prime person.
But I think there's just concern that the working group member isn't reaching all the neighbors, that they're reaching out to their own email list and maybe not getting every single person who lives there. So I don't know do letters go out, actual physical letters to the addresses? How are we reaching
Usually it's
people?
been emails is my understanding, but we've been expanding the messaging because I've had a couple streets where I'm not sure that the penetration's been
Yeah,
good.
it just sounds like there needs to be some
It's also been
mail.
very quiet for, a period of time while
Right.
we waited for funding.
Okay.
So I'd be glad to follow up.
'Cause the message I got was, they're almost done this and I don't know anything about it and they're really going to change the shape of what's going on here. Is it really necessary? And I didn't have any answers because I'd never heard of the project. So thank you for doing that outreach. And then I'm wondering if we need to do some kind of education program on neighborhood traffic calming about what all these things are. Because what are bump outs? Why do we use a bulb out? And is there any glossary or explanation of what these are and why we would use them? so that we can point people to those, because some people really don't like those bump outs, and I know there's reasons why we're using them to shorten the path across the street.
On the website, but we can certainly look at, making sure their glossary is a little more robust.
Just to explain for people.
I think we have pictures.
Oh, do we have
some
pictures? Okay.
Engage with the community. There's sort of little examples.
Yeah, when we do the individual projects with the community, we certainly do. I can look at the website and see if there's any with the basic descriptions. And then we've, of course, added the map that you were referring to now, so that we can be more, now that we have funding and we have schedules for the projects, we can keep that more up to date.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Snyder, then Ms. Hardy.
Yeah, we got some emails on the North Road traffic call, and we provided an answer to that. That's the status.
And we've been in communication with the resident who was emailing you, as well as our official POC. And so they're current on where their status is, and we'll be convening a neighborhood meeting, because it also has been quiet since the petition in 2017 pending money. So.
Also,
we're responding and moving forward.
We'll have this meeting.
Yeah, we need to have the meeting first. The concepts had been preliminary on speed humps, but we hadn't actually gone to the community with any design and for their light solution to agree to. So we'll be scheduling that meeting. But I've spoken.
We'll let people know when that date is if others want to come. But and we'll also have I spoke with the chief of police, and between police and the sheriff, we'll try to have a higher visibility on the street as well. I think there was an accident over the weekend that prompted it.
So we'll be prepared to make a comment.
Also following up on South Fleet emails as well.
So at the CACT meeting last week, we had similar issues on Marshall Street, all those streets. So again, this is, we can deal with this as one-offs, but it's increasingly difficult to deal with as one-offs, because it's really one-offs in the entire city at this point. So yeah, we need to address particular areas, and maybe that will accumulate into overall approach. And one of the things we're pressing for is limiting the speed, the ability to limit the speed limit. If that's still alive, I think that it is. I hope that it is. Pressing that in Richmond. So the current proposal is the ability to lower the speed limit to 15 miles per hour. So I think that's going to be an important piece going forward. But in the discussion at the CACT, the issue came up about we're not trying to, and here it was a comment from staff, and I'm not being negative towards staff, but it was an interesting communication. We are not trying to limit cut-through traffic, we're only trying to manage it. So I'm wondering what else we can do on a citywide basis. I think the ability to lower the speed limits, the ability to put in speed enforcement, which has been in trouble in Richmond. I'm not sure that's going to make it. So anyway, I think what we need to do is, in addition to working these individual projects, as neighbors come to us, we need a citywide approach that may involve things like speed limits and whatever. So anyway, I put that on the table. Ending on good news, on Thursday we were approved for $136,000 in CMAQ RSTP money from the MBTA, thanks to staff, because when there's more money out there, it takes more staff work to get it. So I appreciate staff looking at each of these, and if anything, ramping it up. Look at each one of these opportunities if we can make a good case for a project that will benefit us in terms of particular traffic calm. So thanks for that. And I earned my pay.
All right, Ms. Hardy, then Mr. Z.
Thank you. So I had a bunch of head and traffic calming things too. So I agree with Mr. Snyder. Citywide stuff. So speed limit, speed cameras. The other thing I would add to that list is that $200 fine. I think we had an email thread about our ability to do that. I think Arlington gave us props actually in their video that we do this everywhere, but they actually talked about how our signs are not as visible. So my questions are, which streets currently have the $200 fine? Can we add more streets to that to enable that, and then can we make the signs more visible if that's a good deterrent to prevent from speeding? So I like that kind of citywide thinking. On the rest of my list, so were we talking about the same street? Because you mentioned North Oak, but we got emails about South Lee and South Oak. Are those different issues?
Well, no, North Oak is different.
North Oak is different than South Oak.
That's one that's moving ahead.
So that's South Oak. North Oak is a different issue.
North Oak is a different street, different petition.
So what the update you gave is that there was a neighborhood meeting about North Oak, or is there a meeting about South Lee and South Oak?
I don't want to misspeak and get them backwards.
Sorry, what was the question?
Cindy gave an update and said there was going to be a neighborhood meeting and we were in touch with point of contact. Is that for North Oak or is that for South Lee and South Oak?
That was for South Oak.
No, South Oak is Stephanie Oppenheimer.
That's
is on
North
Oak.
No, North Oak. We're having a community on North Oak. They're in the queue. They've been ready to go the next step pending money. South Lee is not in the current budget amendment, but we are working with them to get the petition. We're also looking to see if there's some administrative signs as well as enforcement because of the recent hit and run, but they will have to, they're not in the queue for heavy solutions right now.
Yes, so my request on South Lee, and I'm not aware of the North Oak, so I'm glad that's taken care of. On South Lee and South Oak, I feel like ultimately the solution they're asking for that they came to us petition for is that sidewalk on South Lee. But in the near term, knowing that that's going to be expensive, is the three-way stop there would really be helpful. Because currently there's only one stop sign and Oak does not require us to be stopped. So that's something I'd like us to consider more, as well as enforcement. Because this is now the second or third time I've heard about speeding drivers in the morning, especially one really quick driver that flashes a little finger up to everyone on the street. So I feel like having care about stop that.
She's apologized. Just
The,
lay off her.
The
Yes.
NTC team is meeting weekly, and we have South Lee on and that issue for this week's agenda.
Okay, so if we can deploy something immediate, I think that neighborhood would appreciate it. Between, I think this is either their second or third accident they've had where cars got swiped. So clearly there's a speed issue with the hill. So until we can get them a sidewalk, it's more of a heavy solution. I'd like to see more signage or police activity there.
And this month, we're also doing data collection on those streets as well as Marshall and the whole federal grant project.
My next thing is on the Shreve project right now, where we're undergrounding, we're doing all the sewer work. So I went by this morning at 9 o'clock. The temporary crosswalk is not there. It's only halfway across the street. So I tried to cross the street and I counted. There were 10 cars that sped by that would not let me cross at 9 o'clock. It's not even prime rush hour. So if we're expecting our kids.
That was very bad. That one was very bad.
You're one of the 10. Who knows? But when Metro eliminates half the parking spaces at West Falls Church, we're going to have a lot more people using Shreve Road to try to get to West Falls Church Metro, and that crosswalk, that new temporary crosswalk at Gordon's Road, needs to be functional. Currently, only half the crosswalk is painted. There's no lights. People really don't know to stop at that new crosswalk. I'd love to see more there.
Understood. The paint, it was fully painted and the paint's already gone.
Yes.
And the, but getting one of those
Crayon.
ped crossing signs.
Yes,
would be
if we
in
can do a
order.
sign, if we can do flashing signs, because it is kind of a.
It's a tricky city. It's an uncontrolled ped crossing, and
we don't want people to have a false sense of security.
people speed down that road. It's got the engineers very nervous that we're allowing
Yes.
people to cross.
Yeah, we
there
had a
at all.
fatality there just last summer, and so the fact that we're asking people to cross at something that's not a designated crosswalk makes me really nervous. Between the kids walking to middle school and high school, the extra pedestrians we're going to have getting to Metro, like it made me anxious. So I saw it for myself today, so I was not comfortable with the current condition. Fourth thing, we had a separate email chain about LPIs and full protected crosswalks. And I know that CACT discussed it. They were supportive of testing one and doing more LPIs. I'd like to make a request to just add that as a line item in our work plan, just so it's formally tracked. We keep talking about it, but I think everyone supports the idea of doing more of them. So maybe it's in our work plan, track progress. My last thing. So we got a letter today from the CACT and Health and Wellness to ensure we do some near-term actions for safer routes to school. So while we have kind of the long discussion of getting the sidewalk on Street approved pending a $10 million grant from the MTA, which I don't think will come for 4 or 5 years, what's our current plan to get people to school even after all the sewage work is done? Open up the sidewalk. I think there were talks that we had with Federal to talk about a route behind Giant that would lead to Offit and kind of gravelly path through West End Park. So with work happening in West End Park this spring, I'll dig up things with new gas work. Is that a good opportunity to put in a more formal path back there while we've got equipment to park?
Well, we need to acquire the property. We don't have right of way there. That's what we're talking
I don't know where officially it is, whether it's private. Because through the park it's ours, right?
about. Through the park is ours,
Gravel
but
park.
we have no
I walk through
connection.
there too.
It's a parking lot for the people across the street, like the
It's
automobile.
currently like pavers. Did we put the pavers in that lead to the park?
Right to the edge of the property line, but getting to Offit is not. We don't have access. But that could be a work plan item. That's
Yeah. Offit was really quiet and calm. I think it was just getting through West End Park. And it's at most a 20-foot stretch. As I ran through it this morning after I nearly got hit on truth. So I do think that would be something worth. Because we don't have a great way to connect the WNOD.
It's on the open space acquisition app. It goes way back. It's just kind of gotten been allowed to do it without formal acquisition. That eventually.
Define it as an official like path to school, and that it's not good. It's not ours. You can't just ask for permission. It's still walk like. Did someone follow up in response to that letter? It went to us in the school board. So should respond that says it's on our plan, or here are the steps that need to happen. They've asked me several times about that now. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Z, then Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Very quickly then, the status of the drainage, stormwater on Wren's branch. The website says work is scheduled to be complete by summer of 2018. That may be a little bit optimistic at this point. So either change the website or do the work on it. You don't have to answer the question tonight if you don't have to answer.
I'll just say very briefly, there is money, and that's one of the projects that's already appropriated. The engineering just keeps coming back with costs that are higher than stuck on that. So we are still working it.
Can we have someone win the coin toss?
It's just it's proved to be very expensive to get done.
Mr. Lichtenhouse.
So I want to go back to traffic calming. What is it about our process that does not allow us to unilaterally make a decision to implement some of the light solutions? I mean, the amount of email traffic and calls that I got related to the South Oak and South Lee issue, I think somebody described it best, where this entire process has almost become like a comical parody of really just a bad series of events where there's communication, there's going to be neighborhood conversations, there's money that needs to be appropriated, but we have to go through this process, and it's got to be committee, it's got to be consensus, then we have to get staff involved, when I think any reasonable person could walk up to that street, that intersection, and say there's some light solutions that we can implement unilaterally in the name of public safety, whether it's paint, crosswalks, a stop sign, something. I mean, there's got to be something that could be implemented, not in years, not in months, but in a matter of weeks. And I feel that there are a number of places around the city where maybe I just haven't been on council long enough, but some of these things we've been talking about for a year, where some of these solutions could have been implemented very quickly. It's not expensive to make a sign. It's not expensive to put one in. I had one run over by a driver in front of my house. The kids' school crossing sign was plowed over by somebody in a Subaru, and it was replaced within 24 hours. It wasn't. I didn't ask for any kind of special treatment. It was just replaced very easily. So I don't know if it's a process change that we need to go through, but it's beginning very, very frustrating that money is one thing, but some of these things just don't really cost much money. And there's obviously room in the budget because we're moving money around for all of these other things. But to go put up a $250 stop sign or to put some paint on the street, hopefully better paint than what they have on Street Road, we should be able to do that and make a unilateral decision. If it's Public Works or otherwise. And so I'd like a better understanding of how we can get out of this morass of let's do everything by committee and then this process that everything is to go through and start to bifurcate some things and say, you know what, yeah, that's been a problem. Folks have been coming out in droves, and it's not just people complaining about speeding, it's cars are actually being hit or kids are almost being hit or actually being hit, yet we can't do any of the light solutions in the near term. So what is the answer to that? Because the feedback that I'm getting is you have every right to be pissed off about it, frankly, and every right to be frustrated, because if you can go out there, any reasonable person, and say, let's just put a stop sign there or let's put some paint on the street, why we can't do that? But we can sit here and contemplate things for weeks and months and years that, yeah, there's a reason behind it, but some of this stuff is very mean. So what is the answer that I'm supposed to give to those neighbors when it seems so absolutely straightforward and easy that we could send somebody out there to put up a sign or paint? What is the answer to that question or that concern?
So a stop sign requires a warrant study.
Okay.
And we go through it, and very often the engineer says you shouldn't get a stop sign. The stop sign will be more dangerous than the status quo. So then you ask what your engineer tells you. That's what the study says. And that's not what the neighbors want to do.
Okay.
That's very often the case. Generally, every place that can have a stop sign in the city already has one that would meet an engineering standard, because the engineers don't want to put them up where they know everyone's just going to blow right through them. Paint, things like that we can do, we're too slow on. So I think other more creative solutions, just to be responsive, lower the bureaucratic hurdles. That is what we're working on to get that better. And because doing nothing is extremely frustrating.
It is. So it doesn't have to be a stop sign. I'm not saying we need to put a stop sign every intersection,
but I'm just taking that example. But there are other things we can do.
There are
and
hundreds of different really creative signs that I know that Kathy could make in the shop over there that I've seen displayed at VML. People are selling them for like pennies on the dollar. You could probably order them on Amazon right now and put them up tonight and nobody would know. But things related to speeding and to slow down, that type of thing, there've got to be things that we can do, because we talk a lot about communication. We talk a lot about corresponding with the community and going out and meeting with them, and we'll spray paint, which is great for the heavier solutions, but at some point we got to move past communication and actually get to some action. And we don't have to move a mountain for people to say, you know what, like I'll be good for a few months, and yes, it's been quiet for 6 months for whatever reason, but there's got to be something that we can do that's incremental, that we can do right now to help people feel like their concerns are being heard. Because right now, I've been sitting on council for just a little over 2 years, and some of this stuff, it's very simple. We've been talking about for a little over 2 years. And we got the money, and now I'm concerned also that we don't have the resources, because we're talking about people are making staffing requests, and none of those may be met. When it's obvious to me that if it's been held up in this kind of, if it's been held up in this morass of just talking and talking and talking, we're not getting things done, that tells me we may have a resource problem. But I think it would behoove us to start to do some things immediately that people are requesting, so they can see some actions where it's not just all talk.
I think some of it is process, and I think staff would concur. And we've been some of the light solutions, the way the adopted process is you don't have to have a whole community vote, but the working group has to vote and concur. Where some of the stuff really does feel more administrative, and staff who feel it's warranted should be authorized to go do it. So I think we're working to fine tune that so we can be more responsive. Some of it is money, but some of the signs are just being more responsive to immediate need and having the authority to go do it without the whole very important and well-intended entity organic from the bottom up.
Why don't you all get back to us? I think you've heard loud and clear, and you've been hearing this for a while, and we've been hearing it for a while, and we're hearing it. We all got a bunch of emails over the weekend, and so we would like to accelerate the pace of doing things, getting things done, particularly if it's just simple light solutions as a starting point. I think it would be great to get on those, getting more police cars, sheriff's office, whatever, on the streets as a visible sign that we're listening to people, we're hearing people, and we're working on things. I think you've heard all that before. Maybe you could come back with your ideas or plan, try to accelerate the pace of some of these solutions. I think we'd all like to hear that, if you can. All right, is there anything else anybody has? All right, why don't we go into closed session, or at least start the ball on that, and then turn off our TVs and take a short break. I'm going to read a motion to go into closed session. Upon a motion made by council member
Hardy.
and seconded by council member passed by a vote of City Council, council in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3 for the discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose or the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder? Z?
Yep.
Tarter? Yep. And it is 9:50. Let's take the cameras down, take a short break, and come back in closed session. Thank you all.
You staying here or going to You staying here? Wyatt, we staying here?
Let's come on out of closed session. Upon a motion made by council member Z, and seconded by council member,
Hardy.
and passed by vote of City Council, council reconvene in open session. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan? Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yep.
Snyder? Z?
Yep.
Tarter? Yep. All right, it is. What time is it?
11.
All right. Start this with certification. Upon a motion made by council member,
Connolly.
seconded by council member,
Hardy.
and passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the body. Councilman Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan? Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse? Snyder? Z?
Yep.
Tarter? Yep. All right. Anything else to be said tonight?
Let's adjourn.
Let's do it. We're adjourned.